The morning of my graduation from medical school, I stood in front of the mirror in my apartment and pinned my hair back myself. No one helped me with my dress. No one sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee and telling me how proud they were. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of traffic 4 floors below on the street in Columbus, Ohio. I had sent the invitations 8 weeks earlier. 4 of them. My mother, my father, my older brother Marcus, my younger sister Jade. I had written the details by hand on cardstock I bought from a stationery shop on High Street because I wanted it to feel real. I wanted it to feel like something worth showing up for. None of them came. I sat in the 3rd row of the auditorium at Ohio State and listened to the dean call my name, and I walked across that stage alone, and I shook his hand, and I smiled for the photographer. And I carried my diploma back to my seat and held it in my lap with both hands like it might float away if I let go. The woman next to me had her whole family in the stands. Her mother was crying. Her father was filming everything on his phone with his arms straight up in the air. She caught me watching them and smiled at me, and I smiled back, and I looked straight ahead for the rest of the ceremony. I had known this day was coming for a long time, not the graduation. I had worked toward that for 8 years, through undergraduate and to every brutal year of medical school, through 30-hour shifts and failed exams I had to retake, and mornings when I genuinely did not know if I was going to make it. I had known the distance was coming. I had felt it building for years. The slow and deliberate withdrawal of my family from anything that was mine, anything I had built without them. My father is a man who believes that love is expressed through obedience. He grew up in a small town in rural Georgia, the son of a Baptist minister, and he carried that structure into everything he ever built: his home, his marriage, his children. There was a right way to do things and a wrong way, and the right way was always his way, and the wrong way was anything that didn't first pass through him. He is not a cruel man in the way people think of cruelty. He never raised his hand to any of us. He paid every bill. He showed up to Marcus's basketball games and Jade's recitals and my science fairs when I was young. But there was always a cost to his presence, and the cost was that you owed him something afterward. Gratitude wasn't enough. He wanted compliance. He wanted to be consulted. He wanted to feel like the decision maker in every room he entered, including the rooms he hadn't been invited into. When I was 17 and told him I wanted to study pre-med, he told me I should study accounting. He had a friend whose daughter was an accountant, and she made good money and had a stable life. I told him I wanted to be a doctor. He told me I was being unrealistic. I told him I was going to apply to Ohio State anyway. He told me that if I went against his advice, I should expect to go without his help. I went anyway. I worked 2 jobs all 4 years of undergraduate. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I took out loans for the rest. He did not help me financially during those years, and he did not apologize for it. But he also did not disappear entirely. He called occasionally. He sent a card on my birthday. He showed up at Thanksgiving and sat at the head of the table as though nothing had happened. And because my mother never challenged him on anything, because Marcus and Jade had learned early that it was easier to agree with my father than to argue with him, I existed in this strange position inside my family. The one who had left the script. The one who was always quietly being punished for it, but punished in the particular way that controlling people punish, not with confrontation, but with absence, with the slow removal of warmth. By the time I was in my 3rd year of medical school, I had stopped expecting anything from them, not in a bitter way, or at least I told myself it wasn't bitter. I had simply recalibrated. I had good friends. I had my work, which I loved with a fierceness that sometimes surprised me. I had an apartment that was mine, with books on the shelves I had chosen, and a window that looked out over a maple tree that turned extraordinary colors in October. I had built a life. It was a good life. I just had this hollow place in it shaped like a family. The graduation invitations were something my residency advisor, Dr. Renner, talked me into. She had supervised me through my 3rd and 4th years, and she knew my situation in the way that good supervisors come to know things. Gradually, through context, through what you don't say as much as what you do. She told me that I might regret it if I didn't extend the invitation, even knowing they might not come. She said sometimes people surprise you. I appreciated her faith. I sent the invitations. They did not surprise me. My father texted me the afternoon of my graduation while I was still in the auditorium parking lot sitting in my car in my gown. "Congratulations," he wrote. "We're all proud of you." I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone in my glove box and drove home. I started my residency at Mount Carmel West the following July. Emergency medicine. The hours were brutal and the work was relentless, and I loved nearly all of it. There is something clarifying about emergency medicine. The way it strips everything down to what matters right now, in this moment, with this patient. I was good at it. I knew early that I was good at it, not from arrogance, but from the steady accumulation of evidence, from the attending physicians who trusted me with increasingly complex cases, from patients who asked specifically for me on return visits. I was building something real. I met Daniel in my second year of residency. He was a physical therapist at a clinic 2 blocks from the hospital, and we met at a coffee shop on a Wednesday morning when we both reached for the last sleeve of sugar at the same time. And he told me to take it, and I told him I didn't actually need it, and he laughed and said that was probably true. For both of us. We talked for 40 minutes. I was late getting back to the hospital. It was completely worth it. Daniel is the kind of man who is easy to be with. That sounds like a small thing, but I have learned it is not. He asks questions and actually listens to the answers. He remembers details. He does not require me to manage his emotions while also managing my own. When I told him about my family months into our relationship on a Sunday afternoon on his back porch with cups of coffee going cold between us, he listened to the whole thing without interrupting, and when I finished he said, "I'm sorry that happened to you. You deserved better. Not have you tried talking to them, or maybe they meant well, or family is complicated." Just a clean, clear acknowledgement that what had happened was not okay. I decided I wanted to marry him about 3 weeks after that conversation. We got engaged the following spring. I called my mother the day after Daniel proposed, because despite everything I still wanted her to know, I still wanted to give her the chance to be part of something good in my life. She seemed happy on the phone, or at least she said the right words. She said congratulations and that she was glad I had found someone. She did not ask when, or where, or how she could help. She did not call back the following day to say she had been thinking about it and was so excited. She did not, over the following months of planning, volunteer to come to Columbus to look at venues or taste cake samples or do any of the things that mothers do in movies and that some of my friends' mothers actually did in real life. I planned my wedding the same way I had gone through medical school, efficiently, independently, without waiting for help that was not coming. Daniel's family was warm and involved. His mother, Patricia, offered repeatedly, and I let her in more than I might have otherwise, and she was wonderful about it, enthusiastic without being overbearing, opinionated in ways that were helpful rather than controlling. His father and his 2 brothers came to the venue walkthrough, and his brother Ryan cracked jokes the whole time that made me laugh until my eyes watered. I loved them immediately. I was grateful for them in a way that had a slight ache underneath it, because they showed me so clearly what I had been missing. I sent my family formal invitations 6 months before the wedding. Addressed envelopes, proper stamps, RSVP cards with a self-addressed return envelope. My mother did not return the card. My father did not return the card. Marcus texted me 2 weeks before the deadline and said he and his wife probably couldn't make it, some issue with their kid's school schedule. He'd explain later. He did not explain later. He did not explain later. Jade, who was 24 and had always been the most enmeshed with my father's way of seeing things, simply never responded at all. 1 week before my wedding, my father called me. I almost didn't answer. I was in the middle of a shift and I stepped into a supply room for 4 minutes to take the call. He told me he had given this a lot of thought. He said he felt I had made choices in my life that had pushed the family away, that I had prioritized my career and my independence over our relationships, and that as long as I was making choices without consulting the family, he did not feel comfortable celebrating those choices. He said this in a calm, measured voice, the same voice he used when he was explaining a rule that he felt was very obvious. He was not angry. He was disappointed, which somehow was worse. I stood in that supply room between shelves of gauze and saline bags, and I listened to my father tell me that my medical degree and my engagement and my wedding were things he could not celebrate because I had not run them by him first. I was 31 years old. When he finished, I said, "Okay, Dad, I understand." He said, "I hope someday you'll see that I'm coming from a place of love." I said, "I believe you think that," and I hung up. My wedding was on a Saturday in October, and it was one of the best days of my life. Daniel cried when he saw me come down the aisle, which made me cry, which made Patricia cry, which made Ryan say something quietly to his brother that made everyone in the first 3 rows laugh at exactly the right moment to release the tension in a way that felt like grace. We danced until the venue staff started stacking chairs around us. Daniel's father gave a toast that mentioned me by name 8 times, and each time felt like being handed something I had needed for a long time. I went to bed that night happier than I had been in years. The message came 6 weeks later. My father, not a texting man by nature, sent me a message on a Tuesday evening while I was post-call and sitting on my couch in scrubs eating cereal, because it was the only thing I had the energy to prepare. The message said that Marcus was getting married in the spring and that the family needed help covering the costs of the rehearsal dinner. He said the number was $14,000 and that he felt, given how much the family had supported me over the years, that it was reasonable to ask me to contribute. I read it 4 times. I counted the years of student loans I was still paying. I counted the jobs I had worked to put myself through school without anyone's help. I counted the graduation invitations that had gone unanswered, the phone call in the supply room, every absence accumulated over a decade. Then I opened my Venmo app and I sent my father $1. In the note field I wrote, "With love and best wishes for the happy couple." Then I called Daniel into the room and showed him my phone, and we sat together on the couch, and I felt something move through me that I did not have a clean word for. Not revenge exactly, more like clarity, like I had set down something very heavy and only then realized how long I had been carrying it. My father called the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was 6 minutes long. I listened to the first 90 seconds, which were enough to understand the tone, and then I deleted it. I called my phone carrier that afternoon and blocked his number, and then I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage for a while before my shift started, looking at the concrete wall in front of me. What happened next, I did not anticipate. 3 weeks after I sent the $1, I was at work, a Tuesday night shift, busy but manageable, when a colleague came to find me and said there were 2 police officers in the waiting area asking to speak with a Dr. Calloway. That's my name. My name is Claire Calloway. I walked out to the waiting area still in my white coat, my stethoscope around my neck, and I met the 2 officers who were polite and slightly awkward in the way that people are when they have been sent to do something they suspect is a waste of their time. They told me they had received a complaint from a family member. They did not say which one, though I knew immediately, alleging that I had misappropriated funds from a family account and was in possession of items belonging to the estate of my paternal grandmother, who had passed the previous year. I stood very still for a moment. I said, "I don't have access to any family accounts. I haven't had access to my family's finances in any form since I was 17 years old." One of the officers, the younger one, glanced at the other. The older one asked a few more questions, methodically and without particular conviction. I answered each one clearly. I was not nervous. I was a physician in my own emergency department, and I had done nothing wrong and I knew it, and knowing it was enough to keep me steady. After about 15 minutes, they thanked me for my time and left. My charge nurse, a woman named Diane who had seen everything in 30 years of ER nursing, appeared at my elbow the moment they walked out and said, simply, "You okay?" I said I was. She looked at me for a second and said, "You want me to call someone?" I said no. I went back to my patients. But I did not go home that night without calling Daniel. and I did not go through the following days without calling an attorney. A friend from law school who now practiced family law in Columbus and who told me calmly that what my father had done was what it was, a harassment tactic, legally flimsy, probably not going further, but that I should document everything and that if I received any further contact of this kind, I should let him know. I wrote a letter to my father, not an email, a letter typed and printed and mailed. I told him that I had spoken with an attorney. I told him that I had no family assets in my possession and no access to any family accounts, and that he was aware of this because I had been financially independent since the age of 17. I told him that any further contact of this kind would be handled through my attorney. I told him that I wished him well and that I was closing this chapter of our relationship. I did not hear from him for 4 months. What I did during those 4 months was live my life. I finished my residency. I was offered and accepted a position as a full attending physician in the emergency department at Mount Carmel, which meant I had done it. I had actually done it, all the way from that 17-year-old girl who was told to study accounting instead. Daniel and I started talking seriously about buying a house. His mother called me on a random Wednesday just to tell me about a recipe she had made and thought I would like. I told my story in pieces to a therapist I started seeing that spring, and she helped me understand some things about the way I had learned to move through the world. Always independently, always braced. Always managing the hollow place as though it were simply a fact of the landscape rather than a wound. She asked me once whether I wanted a relationship with my father, if I could design it from scratch. I sat with that question for a long time. I said I wanted a father who was capable of seeing me. I didn't know if my father was capable of that. I thought probably he was not. I thought the man he was had been built over too many decades and reinforced by too many people who had never challenged it. I thought I had to accept that. I had mostly accepted it when he called me in September from a number I didn't recognize. I answered because I was on call, and I always answered numbers I didn't recognize. His voice was different. That was the first thing I noticed. The measured quality was gone, the particular authority he carried in his voice like a gavel. He sounded smaller. He told me he had been having chest pain for 2 weeks and had finally gone to the doctor, and they had found something on the scan, and he was being referred to cardiology, and he didn't know yet how serious it was. He said he was calling me because I was a doctor and he didn't know who else to call. I sat down on the chair in the break room. I said, "What did they see on the scan?" He told me what he knew, which was not much. I asked questions, the right questions, the clinical questions, the ones that helped me understand what we were likely dealing with. I told him what the cardiology referral would probably involve. I told him what questions to ask when he got there. I was very calm and very clear, and I was also, somewhere underneath all of that, in the process of feeling something shift in a place I had thought was permanently fixed. He was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then he said, "You're good at this." I said, "I know." He said, "Claire?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I owe you an apology. More than one." He stopped. He was not a man who apologized, and I could hear what it cost him. The particular silence of someone dismantling something they had built for a very long time. "I didn't come to your graduation. I didn't come to your wedding. I sent the police to your job." He said each thing separately, like he wanted to make sure I knew he knew what they were. I convinced myself I was doing what fathers do. I think I was just afraid of losing control of something. I think I was afraid of you not needing me. I did not say anything for a while. He said, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I know." I looked at the wall of the break room. There was a poster about hand washing. There was a whiteboard with names and room assignments. I'd been in this building for 4 years. I had held people's hands while they received news that changed everything. I knew what it looked like when someone was telling the truth, and I knew what it looked like when it was too late, and I knew how to tell the difference. I said, "I appreciate you saying that, Dad." He said, "I appreciate you saying that, Dad." He said, "How are you? Are you happy?" I said, "I am. I really am." He said, "Good." And he meant it. I could hear that he meant it, and that it was not easy for him to mean it. That somewhere in the architecture of who he was, the happiness of the daughter who had never asked for his permission was a thing he had to learn to want for her. But he was learning it. At 70 years old, with a cardiology appointment coming, and something on a scan that we didn't have a name for yet, he was learning it. The cardiology report came back 2 weeks later. It was a valve issue, manageable with medication, likely requiring a procedure in the next year, but not immediately dangerous. I know this because he called me to tell me, and this time I had saved his number. We have not rebuilt everything. I want to be honest about that because the stories that tie themselves up too neatly have always felt dishonest to me, and I spent too many years in an environment where the truth was managed into the shape someone else found acceptable. My father and I talk on the phone occasionally. He asks about my work and I tell him, and he listens, and he does not tell me I should have been an accountant. My mother, who I think understands what happened better than she has ever said out loud, sends me text messages with recipes and photographs of the garden. Marcus and I have one conversation for every 4 I initiate. Jade is still Jade. But last Thanksgiving, my father flew to Columbus. Daniel picked him up from the airport because I was finishing a shift, and by the time I got home, they were sitting at the kitchen table with cups of coffee going warm between them. And my father was telling Daniel a story about something that happened when I was 9 years old, something I hadn't known about, something that showed me at 9 the way he had seen me then, before the distance calcified. I stood in the doorway in my coat and listened, and my father looked up and saw me. And something moved across his face that I recognized. Finally, as the thing that had always been underneath the control and the silence and the absence. He was proud of me. He had always been proud of me. He just hadn't known how to be proud of something he couldn't take credit for. Daniel got up to give me my seat. I hung up my coat. I sat down at the table across from my father and we talked. And it was not everything, but it was something. It was a beginning. Or maybe more accurately, a second beginning, the kind that comes later and costs more and means more because of what it took to get there. I am a physician. I have learned that the body has a profound capacity to heal even from damage that seemed permanent, that scar tissue forms and the function returns, that the word irreparable is one you should use carefully and only when you have exhausted every other option. I try to apply that same patience to the things that are not medical. I don't always succeed, but I keep trying. That is the most honest thing I know how to tell you.